The chamber wasn't silent anymore. It was charged, like a storm crouching just beyond the windows. Lights flickered once, twice, then blackness swallowed the room for a fraction too long. Somewhere, a phone vibrated violently on a wooden bench, its buzz loud as a gunshot in the thick air. Reporters froze, pens poised mid-air. Security murmured urgently into their earpieces, hands tightening on concealed weapons. Someone whispered, "Is this a hack?" And then she stepped forward, alone under the half-lit ceiling, eyes like steel, voice cutting through the static like a blade. "This isn't speculation, this is the truth. They paid $3,100,000 0 cents to bury." Across America, screens exploded with breaking alerts. AOC drops bombshell. DNA scandal engulfs White House. This is the second White House since. Miles away, in the Oval Office, glass shattered, wine spraying crimson across cream walls. The president's phone buzzed non-stop. Every alert pulsed her name in blood red, his voice low and venomous. "Shut her down. Burn everything. I don't care how." But in the shadows, far from cameras and microphones, a single encrypted message blinked alive on a secure line. Phase 1 complete. Initiate blackout protocol. And just like that, the game changed. Not just for her, but for the nation. The chamber felt heavier than usual that morning, like the air itself didn't want to move. Rows of congressional seats stretched out under fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, the sound almost drowned out by the soft shuffling of papers and the muted clicks of pens. It was supposed to be another long, uneventful hearing. Presidential overreach, budget allocations, procedural questions no one outside the Capitol cared about. Reporters leaned lazily against the walls, half listening, half scrolling through their phones. But then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shifted in her chair. She removed her glasses slowly, almost deliberately, like she had been waiting for this precise moment. Her hand rested on a manila folder thick with documents, and as she stood, the room seemed to contract, eyes turning toward her, not out of courtesy but instinct. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This isn't speculation. It's a fact buried under $3,100,000 0 cents of silence. For a heartbeat, silence hung in the room like a held breath. Then a faint buzz, phones lighting up, notifications flooding in. AOC drops bombshell live. Presidential's secrets exposed? The journalists straightened, phones raised, cameras blinking red. AOC's gaze swept the room, pausing just long enough on chairperson Reuben Geller, whose fingers drummed nervously against the polished mahogany table. Someone coughed. Another shifted in their seat. The rhythm of the room had changed. This wasn't on the agenda. Across the country, in a diner outside Cleveland, a man scrolling on his phone stopped mid-bite as the headline flashed. His wife peered over his shoulder. "What did she say?" she asked. He didn't answer, just tapped the volume up. Back in the chamber, AOC's voice stayed even, almost too calm. "We've spent years protecting power at the expense of truth. That ends today." Geller's lips pressed into a tight line. "Congresswoman, I'm not sure this is appropriate," but she cut him off without raising her volume. "There's a set of sealed court documents from an Arizona case in 2019. Those documents detail a financial settlement between the then president, a former staffer, and a child. $3,100,000, 0 cents in hush money. A non-disclosure agreement enforced by power, not justice." A murmur rippled through the room. Phones were now out in the open, staffers typing furiously. "Is she serious?" someone whispered near the back. "She's bluffing," another said, though their tone lacked conviction. The camera feeds caught every flicker of unease, narrowed eyes, clenched jaws, restless hands. AOC paused. Then she opened the folder and held up a photocopy for the cameras, a heavily redacted document, one line visible in bold type. Paternity agreement. DNA confirmation pending. In the West Wing, a junior aide nearly dropped her tablet as she read the alert. "Sir, you need to see this." Trump was in the Roosevelt room, mid-conversation about agricultural tariffs, when he saw his own name flash across the screen. His smile froze. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. But no one answered fast enough. Back in the chamber, Representative Matt Overby leaned forward, voice sharp. "Congresswoman, I must insist this is not the proper venue." But AOC didn't flinch. The people didn't vote for secrecy. They voted for representation. If a president buried the truth about his own family to protect his image, that's not just immoral, it's dangerous. The murmurs grew louder. Chairperson Geller slammed his gavel, his voice trembling slightly. "Order! This is highly irregular." Somewhere in the gallery, a reporter whispered into her mic, her voice barely above a breath. "This isn't just a hearing anymore. This is history." Phones across the nation buzzed again. Twitter trended with hashtags. Hashtag AOC bombshell. Hashtag not his son. Hashtag truth over image. In a coffee shop in Seattle, a college student stared at the TV, his latte cooling in his hands. "She's really doing it," he said to no one. That was At a barber shop in Atlanta, a man in a Falcons jersey muttered, "This is going to get ugly fast." And in a quiet suburban home in Virginia, Melania Trump sat frozen, remote in hand, watching AOC's calm face fill the screen. The camera panned back to AOC as she lowered the document. Her eyes didn't waver. "We owe it to this nation to stop protecting lies because they're comfortable." Chairperson Geller's gavel came down harder this time. "This hearing is adjourned until further notice." But it was too late. The words were out. The fire was lit, and even as staffers scrambled to cut the feed, as aides whispered into earpieces and journalists darted from the room, the damage was already done. Phones everywhere pulsed with push alerts. AOC accuses president of paternity cover-up. Live, nation stunned as bombshell rocks congressional hearing. In the West Wing, Trump's face flushed red as he barked into his phone. "Get me Hope Sinclair, now!" The aide's hand trembled as she dialed. And back in the chamber, AOC collected her papers, her expression unreadable, her voice low but steady as she spoke one final line before stepping away from the mic. "This isn't the end, it's the beginning." The words had barely settled in the chamber when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez set the manila folder flat on the polished table. For a moment, her fingers lingered on its edge, and the room seemed to lean forward as if it already knew this wasn't going to be a standard congressional reveal. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she slid out a photocopy, its blacked-out lines slicing through text like a censor's blade. But one line remained untouched, bold and damning. Paternity agreement. DNA confirmation pending. A faint gasp rippled through the rows of congressional aides. The sound of a pen dropping echoed off marble walls like a gunshot. Then AOC spoke again, her voice still even, but laced now with an undercurrent that suggested steel under silk. "This document is one of several sealed under executive privilege in 2019, but what's more concerning is the attached recording from a closed-door legal briefing." She held up a small, digital recorder, thumb hovering over the play button. "This was leaked to my office 3 weeks ago by a whistleblower with direct access to White House council meetings." The chairperson tried to intervene, his voice cracking slightly. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, I must remind you that introducing such material without prior clearance—" "This is a public hearing, Mr. Geller," she interrupted, eyes locked on his. and the public deserves the truth. She pressed play. At first there was only static, a low hiss that made the room tense like a held breath. Then a male voice, recognizable, sharp, impatient. Hope, we can't let this get out. If that test is ordered, if it's confirmed, it's not just bad optics. It's over. Another voice, female this time, measured but unmistakably worried. We've already filed motions for delay. I recommend executive intervention if the court pushes back. Sir, you need to understand, the NDA won't survive discovery. The first voice again, louder now. Then kill the damn test. Stall it. Pay them off. Do whatever it takes. Just don't let this surface while I'm in office. The recording cut abruptly. Silence crashed into the chamber, heavier than before. Somewhere near the back, a staffer's pen tapped nervously against a legal pad, a small sound that now seemed deafening. AOC clicked the recorder off and placed it beside the folder. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. This isn't a theory, it's an admission, one that implicates the highest office in deliberate suppression of a court-ordered paternity test and an effort to bury the truth beneath power and privilege. Chairperson Geller's knuckles whitened around the gavel. This hearing is out of order. But AOC kept going, her tone unshaken. If a president can weaponize the system to protect his image, what else has been silenced in the name of optics? Across the room, Representative Overby stood, his face flushed. This is reckless. You're smearing a sitting president with unverified. Unverified. AOC's voice cut like a blade. That was his voice. The same voice America heard at rallies, in debates, in the Oval Office. Are we pretending not to recognize it now? In the press gallery, reporters fumbled with phones, thumbs flying across screens. Notifications popped like fireworks across devices nationwide. AOC plays leaked audio implicating Trump. DNA suppression allegation rocks Capitol. Halfway across the country in a Kansas truck stop, a TV above the coffee machines blared CNN. A long-haul driver froze mid-sip, watching AOC's calm face on the screen as a banner screamed, "Live, bombshell revelation on presidential misconduct." Meanwhile, in the West Wing, a crystal glass shattered against the floor. Red wine bloomed across Persian carpet as Trump slammed his phone onto the table. His face, normally ruddy with bluster, had turned pale around the mouth. "Bury her," he hissed into the speakerphone, his voice trembling with rage. "Bury her, whatever it takes." Hope Sinclair's voice came back, tense but controlled. "Sir, we can send cease and desist notices, pursue legal avenues." "No," Trump roared. "No more paper games. Make this disappear." An aide standing nearby flinched as the president's hand came down on the table, rattling a framed photo of Barron. For a beat too long, Trump's eyes lingered on it before he turned away, pacing like a caged animal. Back in the hearing, AOC closed the folder gently and looked up, her gaze sweeping the room like a spotlight. The tension was so thick it felt almost physical, pressing against lungs and throats. "Power has always feared exposure," she said softly. "But we are here to serve the people, not protect the powerful from accountability." Chairperson Geller pounded his gavel. "This is over. I am adjourning this hearing immediately." But even as he spoke, a low murmur had begun in the gallery, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't just the sound of reporters whispering or staffers muttering into earpieces. It was the sound of a narrative cracking, of a country realizing it might not know its own story anymore. In a small apartment in Brooklyn, a college student watching on a cracked iPhone whispered to herself, "She's gonna need protection after this." And in a luxury suite in Manhattan, a man in a tailored suit muttered under his breath, "They'll never let this stand." The chamber emptied slowly. reluctantly, as aides shuffled their principals out with hushed words and nervous glances. AOC remained at her seat for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the folder like it might bite. Then she gathered her papers, stood, and walked out with the same unflinching calm that had carried her through the storm she had just unleashed. Somewhere deep in the White House, a junior aide typed a single line into an encrypted chat. She just lit the fuse. Phase 2? The reply came within seconds. Stand by. And just like that, the first tremor passed. But everyone knew the real quake was still coming. The weight of what had just unfolded inside the hearing room seemed to cling to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as she stepped into the crisp afternoon air. The cameras had been cut, the murmurs had faded, but a different kind of tension followed her out to the Capitol steps. Her aides flanked her, their eyes scanning the crowd that had gathered beyond the barricades, reporters shouting questions, protesters waving signs, and passers-by holding up their phones to capture every second. The sound of shutters clicking merged with the distant hum of engines idling on the street. It wasn't chaos yet, but it felt like standing on the edge of a fault line about to split. "Congresswoman, do you have any comment on the president's response?" a journalist called out, but she didn't break stride. Her face was unreadable, her pace measured. One of her aides whispered sharply, "We need to get you in the car now." The convoy of black SUVs waited at the curb. AOC's driver, a former Secret Service agent, had already positioned the lead vehicle's door open for a quick escape. She descended the last step, boots clicking against stone, when the sound of tires squealing tore through the air like a gunshot. A black SUV, not one of theirs, hurtled around the corner, its engine growling. For a split second, no one moved. Then her security detail reacted in unison. "Move!" someone yelled. AOC was shoved backward as a wall of bodies closed around her. Metal screeched against stone as the rogue vehicle skidded to a halt, missing her by less than 3 feet. The driver's face was hidden behind tinted glass. The engine roared again, and the SUV peeled away, disappearing down Constitution Avenue before anyone could react. AOC's aide, pale and shaking, hissed, "What the hell was that?" "Eyes up, watch the rooftops," her lead security agent barked. His earpiece crackled with frantic voices, the words cutting in and out. "Capitol PD, surveillance blackout. Repeat, cameras down." Another agent cursed under his breath. "You're telling me every damn camera went dead at the same time?" "Sir, feeds are offline. It's being reported as a technical glitch." The agents hustled AOC into the waiting SUV, doors slamming. The driver didn't wait for clearance. He hit the gas hard, weaving through traffic as horns blared. In the back seat, AOC sat rigid, her hands gripping the folder still pressed to her chest. She didn't speak. Her phone vibrated once in her coat pocket. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she pulled it out. The screen lit up with an anonymous message, "No sender. That was your first warning. Don't push for a second." A chill settled over the cabin. One of her aides glanced at the phone and went pale. Is that real?" AOC didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button before she tucked the phone away. Across the city, in a windowless room filled with monitors, 2 men in tailored suits watched the blackout security feeds. One of them, younger, his jaw tight with nerves, spoke first. "They missed." The older man didn't flinch. "They weren't meant to hit." "Then why?" "Because fear lingers longer than blood." Back in the moving SUV, the radio crackled to life. "This is command. All routes cleared. Advise moving to secure site." "Negative," AOC's lead agent replied. "Heading to designated fallback location." AOC finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual but steady. "I'm not hiding." "Congresswoman, we're not running," she said more firmly. "We're going to finish what we started." In a luxury penthouse across town, Melania Trump stood motionless, staring out at the city lights. Her phone sat on the table behind her, screen glowing with headlines she couldn't bring herself to read. A knock at the door broke the silence. She didn't turn. "It's starting," came a voice from the other side. She closed her eyes. It never stopped. Back in the SUV, the convoy took a sharp turn into a narrow alleyway and slowed to a crawl. The agents checked mirrors, scanning for tails. One whispered to another, "This isn't random, it's coordinated." The other nodded grimly. "And they're just warming up." As the vehicle eased to a stop behind a nondescript warehouse, AOC's phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message, this one shorter. Phase 2 initiated. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her reflection faint in the glass. Then she looked up at her team, her voice steady. "They're trying to scare us off the truth." The lead agent's jaw tightened. "And if fear doesn't work, then they'll try something else," she said simply. The warehouse door creaked open ahead, shadows spilling across the wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, rising and falling, like a warning no one could ignore. And as AOC stepped out of the SUV into the dim light, one thought pulsed in the minds of everyone in her security detail. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The sound of the warehouse door slamming behind AOC hadn't yet faded from the minds of her team when, across Washington, the West Wing was already vibrating with a different kind of storm. Voices clashed behind closed doors, aides darted between offices, clutching files they'd been ordered to shred, and the faint smell of burned coffee lingered as interns worked through the night without daring to speak above a whisper. Inside the Roosevelt Room, Donald Trump paced like a caged animal, the red tie at his neck hanging loose and his hair slightly disheveled, his face locked in a scowl that made even seasoned staffers avert their eyes. His phone lay on the table, its screen glowing with headlines that refused to stop. AOC survives near miss, vows to continue revelations. Anonymous threat, Phase 2 initiated. "Find the mole," Trump growled, his voice low but laced with venom. "And find her weakness. Everybody's got one. What is she hiding? Debt, lovers, anything I can use." He stopped suddenly, turning to glare at Hope Sinclair, his personal legal counsel, who sat stiffly at the edge of the table. "You've been too quiet. Tell me something useful, Hope." Sinclair's hands were clasped, her expression carefully neutral, though a faint crease between her brows betrayed tension. "Sir, if Red Lantern surfaces, we lose the White House." Full stop. Trump's eyes narrowed. "So you think it's already surfaced?" Sinclair exhaled slowly, choosing her words. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has enough to make people doubt. That's dangerous, even if she doesn't have the full file." "She's bluffing," Trump snapped. He began pacing again, shoes clicking against the marble floor. "It's a political stunt. She doesn't have the guts to see it through." "She had the guts to walk out alive this morning?" came a voice from the far end of the room. All heads turned toward Brian Halford, Trump's chief of staff, standing half in shadow near the door. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "And she's got half the country listening now. That's not nothing." Trump rounded on him. "So you're saying I should sit here and wait for her to burn my house down?" Halford didn't flinch. "I'm saying we need to plan for the possibility she already lit the match." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the distant hum of servers and muffled conversations in the hall. Then Trump's phone buzzed again. This time, it was Melania's name flashing on the screen. He hesitated before answering, the tension in his shoulders betraying more than frustration. "Melania." Her face appeared on the screen, perfectly composed as always, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup accentuating sharp cheekbones. But her eyes, dark, still held something different. Not anger, not fear, something colder. "This isn't about politics anymore, Donald," she said quietly. "It's about decency." Trump scoffed. "Decency? Don't give me that. You know how this game works." Her expression didn't change. "You told me it was handled. You told me Barron would never have to know." "He was handled," he snapped, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "And then that little socialist decided to play hero." Melania's lips pressed into a thin line. "She's not your problem, Donald. You are." Sinclair shifted slightly, as if uncomfortable hearing the private exchange. Trump noticed and turned his phone face down with a sharp flick of his wrist. "Enough of this," he barked, pacing again. "We're not going to let some junior congresswoman rewrite my legacy. Halford, get Peterson from CNN on the phone. We'll drown her in counter-programming. Leaks, rumors. I don't care if we have to invent scandals. Just keep her off the front page." Sinclair's voice cut through his tirade, even and cool. "Sir, every move you make now will be seen as retaliation. You don't want to look guilty." "I'm not guilty," Trump snapped back. "But she's making it sound like I am." "Then act like you're not," Sinclair replied bluntly. The tension thickened. Across the room, an aide's phone vibrated with an encrypted message. She glanced at it, eyes widening slightly, before slipping the device back into her pocket. Halford noticed but said nothing, his eyes narrowing briefly. He knew the signs. Someone in this room was already hedging their bets. Meanwhile, Melania ended the video call without a word. She set her own phone down in the dim light of her Geneva hotel suite, staring at her reflection in the window. She whispered to no one, "You never understood. It's not about winning. It's about surviving." Back in the West Wing, Trump slammed both palms on the table, rattling a glass of water and sending papers fluttering to the floor. "If she wants war, we'll give her war." Sinclair didn't react. Halford didn't move. The aides exchanged nervous glances. Outside, the sound of helicopters echoed faintly over the White House lawn. And as the meeting dissolved into hushed orders and frantic phone calls, one thought hung unspoken in the air. The first shot had been fired, but no one in this room seemed sure who would pull the trigger next. The echoes of Trump's rage in the Roosevelt Room hadn't even settled when the internet began its own combustion. Hashtags erupted like spot fires across platforms. Hashtag Red Lantern Files, hashtag AOC vs Trump, hashtag Not His Son, all competing for dominance in a digital battlefield that never slept. On Twitter, videos of AOC's calm but cutting delivery looped endlessly, juxtaposed with shaky phone footage of the black SUV that had almost plowed into her outside the Capitol. TikTokers added dramatic soundtracks and slowed footage, emphasizing the moment her security detail pulled her to safety. The algorithm was merciless. In less than 2 hours, the clips had amassed millions of views, each new edit more sensational than the last. At a cramped coffee shop in downtown Manhattan, a barista with a septum ring and tired eyes leaned against the counter, her phone in hand as CNN's live feed played muted on the mounted television. "She's trending everywhere," she muttered to no one in particular. A customer at the corner table glanced up, his laptop open to Reddit, where a thread titled, "Is This the End for Trump?" had already reached 20,000 comments. Another patron scrolled through Instagram, eyes widening at an edit splicing AOC's face with historical figures. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Shirley Chisholm, even Joan of Arc. The caption read simply, "She didn't flinch." Meanwhile, in a Baptist church basement outside Houston, Texas, an emergency congregation meeting had gathered, not about a storm or a fundraiser, but about the storm brewing on their screens. An elderly deacon, adjusting his glasses nervously, spoke first. "It's all just noise. They're always out to smear him." Across the room, a younger parishioner shook his head. "But what if it's not noise? What if she's telling the truth?" The room murmured in response, a low chorus of doubt and defense. Pastor Denson, usually the calmest voice in the room, sighed heavily as he checked his phone. His feed was flooded with screenshots of the alleged paternity agreement. "I don't know if it's true," he admitted quietly, "but it feels different this time." Hundreds of miles away in Boston, a group of college students had commandeered the corner of a campus library. Laptops glowed as they pulled up clips, court filings, and speculative threads. "It's about integrity," one student said, voice sharp. "If he used government resources to hide this, it's bigger than family drama," a classmate countered. "You're assuming she's not playing political theater. No proof yet," another chimed in, fingers flying across their keyboard. "There's already a leaked audio, and now a former White House aide is liking tweets about Red Lantern. That's not nothing." Heated voices rose and fell, drawing stares from nearby students, who couldn't decide whether to join or avoid the unfolding debate. In a diner in rural Pennsylvania, the TV above the counter switched from weather updates to a CNN panel dissecting the implications. The waitress, mid-pour of coffee, shook her head. "He's been through worse. This won't stick." But the customer in the booth nearest the window leaned forward, a retired steel worker with hands still rough from decades of labor. "That woman's got steel in her too," he said quietly, "and she's not backing down." Across the Atlantic, the BBC ran a special segment on the story, dubbing it America's Paternity Crisis. French anchors debated whether it marked the collapse of an image long projected by U.S. leadership. In Canada, a late-night host cracked a half-serious joke. "Turns out America's family values have an NDA clause." Even so, behind the laughter, a current of unease rippled through global headline. On Discord servers and private subreddits, amateur sleuths pored over publicly available documents, matching dates, signatures, and court filing numbers. A viral thread titled "Red Lantern Timeline: What They Don't Want You to See" mapped out connections between Trump-linked shell companies and Arizona-based legal firms. At the end of the thread, in bold red letters, "This is more than gossip. This is architecture." Inside the West Wing, aides watched it unfold in real time, their faces pale as numbers climbed. One whispered to another, "It's not just liberals. Independents are picking this up, even some of the base." Hope Sinclair walked briskly past them, her phone pressed tight to her ear. "We need to cut off the oxygen," she snapped to someone on the other end of the line. "Flood the feeds with something else. I don't care what." But the feeds refused to be drowned. Instead, they seemed to grow louder, more insistent. AOC hadn't posted a single follow-up, yet her silence only fueled the frenzy. At a barbershop in Atlanta, a man getting his fade retouched asked the room, "Y'all think she's bluffing?" The barber shook his head slowly, clippers buzzing. "Nah, you saw her face. That ain't the look of someone bluffing. That's the look of someone holding a royal flush." And in a quiet hotel room in Geneva, Melania Trump sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through headlines on her tablet. One headline caught her eye. Did Melania know? First Lady silent as allegations swirl? Her thumb hovered over her contacts. She considered calling Donald. She didn't. Outside the White House gates, protesters were already gathering with signs. Some read truth over image. Others shouted slogans defending the president. Car horns blared in support or defiance as the crowd thickened. And as day turned to night, the hashtags didn't slow. If anything, they multiplied. Hashtag What is Red Lantern joined the ranks. So did hashtag Truth or Image. Somewhere deep in the digital noise, a new video began trending, a slowed clip of AOC in the hearing room, her hand hovering over the play button of the recorder. The caption read, "She pressed play. Now America can't pause." The wildfire wasn't just burning anymore. It was spreading, leaping state lines, crossing oceans, and igniting conversations in places untouched by politics just days before. And in a corner of the White House, Brian Halford stared at his phone, watching the metrics rise in real time. Without looking up, he murmured, "This isn't a storm anymore. It's a reckoning." The wildfire wasn't just burning across screens anymore. It was seeping into corridors where whispers traveled faster than orders. Somewhere deep inside the West Wing, a man in a crisp suit with an earpiece pressed close to a phone in his hand. His voice was barely above a whisper. "They're planning a second hit, this time clean, no cameras, no witnesses." On the other end, the line was silent for a moment before a reply came. Calm, calculated. "Then we're upgrading to presidential-level protection. Tell her she doesn't move alone, not even for a second." 2 miles away, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in a secure conference room, surrounded by her closest aides and 2 newly assigned Secret Service agents. The room's overhead lights hummed faintly as maps, schedules, and encrypted phone logs were spread across the polished table. She looked up at her security chief, whose face bore the grim set of someone accustomed to worst-case scenarios. "This isn't standard protocol," he said quietly, "but after what happened outside the Capitol and the intelligence we just received, you're now classified as a high-value target." AOC's eyes didn't waver. "Do it," she said, "whatever it takes." Outside, the streets of D.C. pulsed with tension. Protesters for and against her revelation clashed verbally under the watchful eyes of riot police. News choppers circled the skies, their blades chopping the air like an ominous drumbeat. Hashtags still dominated screens. Hashtag Red Lantern Files. Hashtag AOC vs. Trump. But beneath the digital noise, something colder was taking shape. Back inside the West Wing, Brian Halford stood in a dimly lit hallway, speaking into his phone, his voice barely audible over the hum of a nearby vending machine. "This is too far. She's not a threat. She's a congresswoman, not an enemy combatant." The reply was curt and icy. "She's a threat to the presidency. Remember which side you're on, Brian." At the same time, Hope Sinclair stared at a document on her tablet, a series of instructions labeled Phase 2. She scrolled past encrypted payment trails and foreign contractor names, her face unreadable. A junior aide, standing nervously nearby, broke the silence. "Ma'am, should we alert Homeland?" Sinclair didn't look up. "No, this doesn't touch Homeland. This stays in-house." Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she didn't hit send. Not yet. Meanwhile, AOC's convoy pulled out from a secure underground garage beneath her office. The black SUVs were now flanked by unmarked police cruisers and motorcycle units. The drivers wore bulletproof vests under their jackets, their faces tense, eyes flicking to every shadow and alleyway. Inside the lead vehicle, AOC sat quietly, her phone buzzing, with messages she chose not to read. "Congresswoman," one of the agents said, his tone steady but urgent, "we're rerouting. Original path compromised. Possible surveillance ahead." "Compromised?" she asked sharply. "Traffic cams went dark for 6 blocks. Same pattern as the Capitol incident." AOC nodded once, gripping the edge of her seat. "Then don't stop. Ever." In a high-rise office across town, Melania Trump stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights below flickered like a nervous heartbeat. Her phone sat silent on the desk beside her, a single message glowing on its locked screen. "Your silence protects no one now." She didn't pick it up. Not yet. Back in the convoy, the radio crackled with chatter. "Bravo team, eyes on rooftops. All units maintain formation. Watch for blind spots." One agent muttered under his breath, "This feels wrong. Too quiet." AOC's aide whispered, "Do you think they'll try again?" She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I think they already have." A mile behind them, A black sedan eased into traffic, its windows tinted darker than regulation. Inside, two men in tactical gear checked weapons hidden beneath newspapers. The driver spoke into a mic clipped to his collar. Visual confirmed, awaiting green light. Somewhere in the Pentagon, a monitor flashed an incoming secure message. Phase 2 active. Contingency prepared. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. In a cramped apartment in Queens, a group of digital activists scrolled feverishly through leaked documents, their eyes wide. One of them swore under his breath. They're not just going after her reputation, they're going after her. Back in the lead SUV, an alert popped on the dashboard. A drone sighting flagged 2 blocks ahead. The driver's jaw tightened. We need to change routes again, fast. AOC spoke, her voice level. No, stay the course. If we keep running, they win. Her security chief shot her a look in the rearview mirror. With respect, Congresswoman, this isn't about winning anymore. It's about surviving. She met his eyes without flinching. It's about doing both. As the convoy crossed the Potomac, a distant boom echoed across the water. One of the agents muttered, "Was that a test or a warning?" No one answered. And somewhere in a darkened control room, lit only by screens, a voice over the comm said, "They're moving faster than expected. Accelerate the timetable." Another voice replied coldly, "Confirmed. Phase 3 is now in play." The hum of the crowd was a low, restless murmur as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped onto the makeshift stage in Lincoln Park. Hundreds of supporters stood shoulder to shoulder, their signs waving in the cold air. Truth over power, no more secrets, and we stand with AOC. The winter sun cut sharp angles through the barren trees, glinting off camera lenses and streaming phones. From a distance, it all looked peaceful, a democratic ritual of speech and solidarity. But up close, beneath the surface, there was a tension so tight it felt like a wire about to snap. In her earpiece, the lead security agent's voice was clipped and calm. All clear. Perimeter locked. Rooftops scanned twice. AOC nodded slightly as she adjusted the microphone. Her hands didn't tremble. If anything, they looked too still. Her eyes swept the crowd, not with fear, but with a quiet resolve that made even the most distracted onlookers lower their phones. "Today isn't about me," she began, her voice carrying easily over the park. "It's about us, all of us, demanding the truth even when it's inconvenient. Especially then." Somewhere 2 blocks away, in the cramped interior of a nondescript van, a man in a tactical jacket whispered into his headset. Target acquired. Wind speed steady, no obstructions. On the rooftop of a 5-store brownstone, a figure lay prone, his rifle resting on a tripod. He adjusted the scope slightly, the crosshairs tightening around AOC's heart as he murmured into his mic. Breath steady, 2 clicks left, clear line of fire. Back in the park, her security detail shifted subtly. One agent scanned the crowd, noting a man with his hands buried deep in his jacket. Another agent spoke softly into his mic. "Rooftops are too quiet. Feels off." AOC kept speaking, unaware of the eyes tracking her from above. "They told us silence was safety. They were wrong. Silence is complicity." The sniper's finger hovered over the trigger, slow and deliberate. His breathing matched his heartbeat, a rhythm drilled into him through years of quiet jobs in foreign countries where names didn't matter. He spoke one line, barely audible even to himself. "On my mark." In the security van, alarms suddenly blared. One of the monitors flashed red. "Thermal spike detected. Roof, 9 o'clock." The lead agent didn't hesitate. He barked into his comms, "Sniper, get down." The shout cut through the park like a whip. AOC's eyes widened as 2 agents lunged toward her. One tackled her to the stage floor just as a sharp crack split the air. A bullet punched into the wooden podium where she had been standing, splintering it into jagged shards. Screams erupted from the crowd. Phones dropped. Someone yelled, "Gun!" as panic surged like a tidal wave. "Move! Move! Move!" the agent roared as they pulled AOC behind a line of barricades. Another shot rang out, missing by inches, as it sparked off a metal railing. On the rooftop, the sniper's comm had broken. Target covered, no clear shot. "Abort, repeat, abort and exfil," came the reply in his earpiece. He hissed through his teeth, pulling back from the scope. Down below, chaos rippled outward. Parents clutched children, supporters crouched low, some frozen in place, others scrambling for cover. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. AOC's breathing was fast but controlled as she crouched between two agents. One checked her for injuries while the other scanned the rooftops. "You hit?" She shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're lucky." Her eyes flicked to the shattered podium, then back to the panicked crowd. "No," she said quietly. "They missed on purpose." The lead agent gave her a sharp look. "We can't assume that. They had a clear shot." "They wanted a message," AOC replied, her voice steadier than even she expected. "Not a body. Not yet." A black SUV screeched to a halt behind the stage. The door swung open as more agents spilled out, weapons drawn. "We need to get her out now!" "Go, go, go!" barked the lead agent as they hustled her toward the vehicle. Another shot echoed, this one aimed not at her, but at the tires of the SUV. Rubber shredded with a deafening pop. "Damn it, secondary vehicle." A second SUV barreled around the corner, agents waving them in. AOC was shoved into the back seat, the door slamming shut behind her. The convoy peeled away as police sirens finally converged on the scene. Inside the SUV, AOC sat in silence, her knuckles white against the folder clutched to her chest. One of her aides whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't random anymore, is it?" AOC didn't answer. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Slowly she pulled it out. Another anonymous message glowed on the screen. "Next time, there's no warning." The agent beside her muttered under his breath, "They're escalating." AOC's eyes stayed on the screen, her thumb hovering over the power button, as if debating whether to shut the whole thing down. But she didn't. As the SUV turned sharply, the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Somewhere out there, someone had just signed off on a kill order, and she knew it. The Oval Office was unusually quiet, except for the low hum of voices behind its heavy double doors. Melania Trump stood in the hallway just outside, her heels silent on the plush carpet as she lingered in the shadows. She wasn't supposed to be there. The meeting had been labeled strictly internal, only Trump's closest circle allowed. But as she adjusted the tiny earpiece tucked beneath her hair, the voices inside came through, muted but clear. "Enough stalling," Trump's voice barked, sharp and unrestrained. "I don't care what it costs. Silence her permanently. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Mr. President." Hope Sinclair's cooler, measured tone followed. "We have contingencies, but we need to escalate carefully. Any misstep—" "Careful?" Trump snapped. "You think she's being careful? She's out there holding rallies like she's untouchable. The next move isn't about careful, it's about making an example." There was a pause. Another voice, Brian Halford's, spoke low. "Sir, if this leaks—" "Then bury the leak, Halford," Trump interrupted. "Bury it, bury her, bury anyone stupid enough to stand in my way. We end this now." Melania pressed her back against the wall, her hand tightening around the phone in her coat pocket. Her face was a mask of composure, but her chest felt like it was caving in. She closed her eyes for a moment, willing her breath to steady as the conversation inside continued, their words now a blur of logistics and thinly veiled threats. When footsteps approached from inside, she moved quickly, gliding down the hall with the practiced ease of someone who had learned how to disappear without ever leaving. In the privacy of her suite, she paced. Her mind replayed Trump's voice over and over, each word heavier than the last. Silence her permanently. She had once convinced herself she didn't have to be a part of this side of his world, that she could stay in her carefully curated bubble of charities, appearances, and polite smiles. But that bubble had just burst. Her phone vibrated in her hand. She stared at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your husband's words aren't just words anymore. You know this." For a long moment she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the city lights beyond the curtains. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone else. Someone who hadn't yet decided whether to intervene or retreat. She had stayed silent before, and it had been easy. But this wasn't easy anymore. She tapped on her contacts. Her thumb hovered over a name she never thought she'd call. Then she pressed it. AOC was in the back seat of an armored SUV when her phone buzzed. The caller ID stopped her mid-breath. "Melania Trump?" One of her aides frowned. "Are you going to answer that?" She did, bringing the phone to her ear cautiously. "This is Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez." The reply was soft, almost a whisper. "They won't stop, not until it's done." AOC froze. "Who is this?" "You know who this is," Melania said, her accent unmistakable. "And you know I wouldn't be calling if I didn't have a reason." The SUV hit a bump, jolting them both slightly in their separate worlds. AOC's security chief leaned in, his expression sharp. "Is it secure?" She raised a hand to quiet him. "What reason?" "I have what you need," Melania said simply. "Proofs, documents, recordings. He kept everything, every order, every payment." "Why now?" AOC asked, her voice tight. "Because I watched them plan it," Melania whispered. "Tonight." The second attempt was never meant to miss. Silence stretched for a beat too long. Then Melania spoke again, her tone clipped. "We meet alone. No aides, no cameras. You decide where. But soon, before they make their next move." AOC's fingers drummed lightly against the folder in her lap. "If this is a trap, isn't," Melania cut in. "I want out too." The line went dead. In the SUV, the aide stared at AOC. "Was that?" "Yes," she said. Back in the White House, Melania slid her phone into her purse just as Trump entered the suite. He didn't notice the tension in her shoulders, or the way her hand lingered over the purse clasp. He was too busy muttering about headlines and approval ratings. "Did you hear?" he said with a forced laugh. "They're calling her bulletproof now. Cute." Melania smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, very cute." As he disappeared into the adjoining room, she exhaled, her hands trembling slightly for the first time in years. And in the darkened streets of D.C., AOC's convoy made a sharp turn, her security chief speaking into his comms. "We need a new secure location. Discretion is top priority." The tension in the air felt different now, heavier, sharper, as if everyone knew the next move could decide everything. The air in the quiet cafe carried the faint scent of roasted beans and polished wood, masking the tension hanging between two women seated at a corner table. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had arrived first, flanked by two security agents who now lingered discreetly outside. When Melania Trump entered alone, dressed in an understated black coat with no entourage, she didn't look like the wife of a sitting president. She looked like someone walking into her own trial. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before AOC gestured to the seat across from her. Melania sat down carefully, setting her purse on the table between them like a silent barrier. For a few moments, neither spoke. The hum of other patrons' conversations and clinking cups seemed far away, irrelevant. AOC broke the silence. "You said you have something. I risked everything to be here. This better not be a game." Melania's hands rested lightly on the purse clasp. Her voice was soft but steady. "It's not a game. I stayed silent too long. Now I want out." She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim, black USB drive. She held it between her fingers as if weighing its significance. On this are recordings. Donald's meetings with Hope Sinclair, Brian Halford, and 2 unnamed contractors. They discuss stalling the DNA order, payments, contingencies for the press. Even phrases like "kill option" are there. AOC's expression didn't change, but her hand twitched slightly on the tabletop. "Hush money?" Melania nodded. "Documents confirming transfers. 3.1 million. Red Lantern Diagnostics is mentioned multiple times." "Why not go public yourself?" AOC asked, her voice tight. "Because they will destroy me before I open my mouth," Melania said simply. "But he underestimated you. He doesn't believe you're dangerous until it's too late." For a beat, neither woman moved. Outside the window, traffic rolled past under the pale glow of streetlights. "Do you understand what this means?" AOC's voice was low but urgent. "Yes." Melania set the USB on the table and pushed it across with one manicured finger. "It means there's no going back." AOC stared at the small device. "You're putting a target on your own back." "I already had one," Melandi replied with a faint, sad smile. "At least this way, I choose where it lands." A waitress approached, oblivious to the storm brewing in plain sight. "Can I get you ladies anything?" "Just water," Melanie said without looking up. AOC didn't answer. She picked up the USB, her fingers closing around it tightly, as if fearing it might dissolve into nothing. "Are you sure there's no duplicate?" she asked. "There are 2, Melania admitted. "One is hidden, insurance. If I disappear, it surfaces." AOC nodded slowly. "Smart." Melania's eyes softened, but her tone hardened. "He's more dangerous than you think. He doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. Whatever you do next, you must be faster than him." "You could help us take him down," AOC said, her voice sharper now. "Testify, stand beside me." Melania shook her head. "If I do, he'll use Barron. He always does. This is all I can give, for now." AOC's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her security detail. "Time's up. Location compromised. Extraction needed." She didn't show it to Melanie, but nodded curtly. "We have to leave." Melanie stood first, adjusting her coat. She didn't extend her hand, didn't say goodbye. "Be careful, Alexandria. They'll come harder now, and when they do, remember, I warned you." AOC slipped the USB into her jacket and watched as Melania disappeared into the night, swallowed by the moving shadows of passing cars. Outside, AOC's security agents were tense. "Congresswoman, we need to move. Possible tail on 4th Street." She followed them into the armored SUV, her mind racing. The USB in her pocket felt heavier than it should, as if it carried not just data, but the weight of every choice that had led her here. From a rooftop across the street, a pair of binoculars tracked their exit. A voice crackled softly into an earpiece. "Visual confirmed. Package transferred. Advise?" The reply was a low growl. "Stand by. We wait for her next mistake." As the SUV sped away, AOC glanced at the darkened cafe growing smaller in the rearview mirror. She didn't know yet if this was the beginning of the end, or just another opening act in a battle no one else could see coming. The rain in Phoenix that night felt out of place, soft, steady, almost tender against the heat-baked sidewalks. But inside the hotel suite, nothing was tender. Genevieve sat on the edge of a leather couch, her hands gripping a crumpled tissue, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Across from her, Donald Trump stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression a mask of irritation and calculation. "You don't understand what's at stake here," he said, his voice low but edged with the kind of threat that didn't need volume to be sharp. Genevieve shook her head, her voice breaking. "He's your son. He deserves to know." "I deserve." "You deserve what I decide you deserve," Trump interrupted, stepping closer. He pulled a folded document from his jacket and tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a muted slap against the glass. "This solves everything. You sign, you get the money, and you disappear. Or," he let the word hang, heavy and cold. Her breath hitched. She looked down at the papers, the words swimming through tears. Non-disclosure agreement. Confidential settlement. 3.1 million. "I can't," she whispered. "You will," Trump said flatly. "You don't have a choice." Genevieve's hand trembled as she reached for the pen. Her mind was screaming at him, at herself, at the impossible situation, but her body moved anyway. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing into her chest, suffocating. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was almost drowned out by the pounding of her heart. She didn't remember signing her name, only the way her tears smeared the ink. When it was done, Trump picked up the documents with clinical precision. "Good," he said. "Now keep your end of the deal. No interviews, no lawsuits, no contact. You live your life, and I'll live mine." He left without another word, the door clicking shut with a finality that made her flinch. For a long time, Genevieve didn't move. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, sharp and cloying. She stared at the photograph in her lap, a picture of a baby boy, no more than 6 months old, his eyes wide and searching. Her fingers traced the edge of the photo, trembling. She whispered his name. "Elliot." Her voice cracked on the second syllable. The memory of his tiny hand gripping her finger flooded her chest with warmth and pain in equal measure. She had wanted to fight, had walked into that room ready to demand acknowledgement, to stand tall, but she hadn't been ready for the coldness, the machine of wealth and power grinding her down to a decision she never wanted to make. In the present, Genevieve sat at her kitchen table, that same photo now older and faded, edges curling. Her hand still shook as she ran her thumb over the baby's face. He wasn't a baby anymore. He was 20, in college, and unaware of the storm about to crash over his life. Her phone buzzed against the wood. A message from an encrypted number. "It's time. You need to speak." She closed her eyes and exhaled shakily. "I don't know if I can." Another message appeared seconds later. "If you don't, someone else will." The words lingered like an echo in her mind, louder than the rain outside. She thought of Elliot's smile, of the years she spent keeping him safe, of the cost she had paid in silence. Her fingers curled around the photo as if it were a lifeline. Somewhere far away, in a Capitol Hill office lit by the pale glow of desk lamps, AOC stared at the USB Melania had given her, unaware that Genevieve was staring at her own ghosts. Both women, different worlds, yet pulled into the same orbit by secrets too heavy to keep buried. The room was small, dimly lit and quiet, except for the faint hum of a heating vent in the corner. A single folder sat between two women at a weathered oak table, its edges worn like the hands that had carried it here. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on the woman across from her. Genevieve Larson looked smaller than AOC had imagined. Not physically, but in a way that spoke of years spent folding herself into the shadows. "I didn't ask for this," Genevieve began, her voice low, almost fragile, but with a steel thread running through it. "I tried to stay invisible. I thought silence was protection. But it isn't. It's complicity." AOC didn't interrupt. She let the words settle, heavy and real, as she studied the woman's hands. They were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white, a faint tremor betraying the calmness of her voice. "You were protecting your son," AOC said gently. Genevieve's eyes flicked up, sharp and weary. "I thought I was. But what kind of protection is built on fear, on letting him grow up believing a lie because it was easier for me?" There was a pause, the kind that stretches between two people who both know the cost of the truth but have chosen different times to pay it. AOC reached forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. "This is everything?" Genevieve nodded. "Recordings, bank transfers, copies of the original court filings, Red Lantern, the NDA." She hesitated, then added, "And a copy of the paternity test request. It's all there." AOC's security chief stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, eyes scanning the empty meeting space. "We shouldn't stay long," he said quietly. "We won't," AOC replied without looking up. Her focus remained on Genevieve. "You know what happens once this goes public?" Genevieve let out a shaky breath, her gaze drifting to the window, where the faint glow of a street lamp cut through the blinds. "I lose my quiet life. Maybe more." Her voice steadied. "But maybe it's time." AOC opened the folder, skimming the top page. A payment authorization bearing Trump's signature. Below it, a transcript of a recorded phone call where Trump's voice was unmistakable, discussing contingencies and disposal of problematic documents. She closed the folder slowly and placed her hand on top of it, her palm firm. "Let's end this," she said. Genevieve studied her, searching for any sign of hesitation. She found none. "Do you believe me?" "Yes," AOC answered. "And I believe they'll come harder now that we have this." Genevieve's lips curved in the faintest, saddest smile. "They were always going to come harder. The question is, will you keep standing when they do?" "I have no choice," AOC said quietly. "Neither do you anymore." The door creaked as an agent stepped closer. "Congresswoman, we need to move." AOC rose, tucking the folder securely under her arm. She offered Genevieve a hand. For a moment, Genevieve stared at it, then reached out, her grip firmer than expected. "You're braver than you think," AOC said softly. Genevieve shook her head. "No. I'm just done being afraid." As they parted, the heating vent clicked off, leaving only silence and the sound of retreating footsteps. Outside, the black SUVs waited, their engines rumbling low like a warning. And somewhere across the city, a phone vibrated on a mahogany desk. A message flashed on the screen. "She has the files. Phase 3 now, unavoidable." The night air was thick with tension as unmarked SUVs crept down a narrow residential street on the outskirts of Arlington. Their headlights were dimmed, engines whisper quiet. Inside one of them, a man in tactical gear spoke into a secure headset. "Visual confirmed. Target residence identified. No civilian movement. Operation Clean Sweep is a go." In the small house at the end of the street, Genevieve sat by the window clutching a steaming mug of tea, though her hands were too unsteady to lift it. Her phone vibrated on the table. A text from AOC's team flashed. "We're en route. Do not move." She whispered to herself. Too late. Outside, shadows shifted. Figures in dark uniforms fanned out, their boots silent against the asphalt. One gestured to the others, two fingers raised. A signal. A mile away, AOC's armored convoy raced through back streets, tires screeching on tight turns. In the lead SUV, her security chief spoke urgently into his mic. "Satellite shows multiple heat signatures converging on the property. We have maybe 3 minutes." "Push it," AOC said, her voice calm but clipped. "She's not going to be another headline." Genevieve watched through half-closed blinds as the first shadow approached her front door. She could see the faint gleam of a weapon slung low across his chest. Her phone buzzed again, this time a voice message. AOC's, sharp and urgent. Get away from the windows. Stay low. We're seconds out. Her breath hitched. She backed away from the glass just as a muffled thud shook the doorframe. Someone testing the lock. Then headlights flared down the street. The armored SUV skidded to a halt outside, rear doors flinging open as agents in plain clothes leapt out. "Go now!" one barked into an earpiece. Genevieve didn't hesitate. She grabbed the photo of Elliot from the table, shoved it into her coat pocket, and sprinted as the front door rattled violently. "Move! Move!" an agent shouted as he grabbed her arm and shielded her body with his own. The team hustled her across the lawn. A sharp crack echoed, her porch light shattering as a warning shot punched through the glass. "Gunfire," the lead agent called. "Suppressive only. They're not here for cleanup. They're here for containment." AOC leaned out from the SUV as Genevieve was pushed inside. "Drive," she ordered, her hand gripping the overhead rail as the vehicle lurched forward. In the rearview mirror, black-clad figures spilled onto the street, weapons raised, but no one fired at the retreating convoy. Not yet. Inside the SUV, Genevieve's breathing came fast and shallow. "They were going to—" "Yes," AOC said simply. "And they're not done." As the convoy weaved through side streets, radio chatter cracked through the speakers. "New intel. High-level exchange caught on surveillance. Senior White House aide coordinating with CIA assets. Operation Clean Sweep confirmed." AOC's jaw tightened. "Who?" The voice on the other end hesitated. Then, "Halford." The name hung in the air like a blade. Genevieve turned to AOC, her voice barely above a whisper. "If they're using the CIA, it means this isn't political anymore," AOC finished for her. "It's systemic." Back at the White House, Brian Halford paced in a dimly lit office, his phone pressed tight to his ear. "You promised containment," he hissed. "She's still alive. They're both still alive." A voice on the other end replied, low and cold. "Containment failed. Phase 3 authorization stands. Are you still with us, Halford?" Halford's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting someone to be listening. He didn't answer. On the streets of D.C., the armored convoy barreled toward a safe house, sirens faint in the distance. AOC glanced at Genevieve, who clutched the photo in her lap as though it were the only anchor left. "They're closing in on every side," Genevieve whispered. "Let them," AOC said, her eyes hard. "We're going to drag them into the light." In a small cafe in Des Moines, Iowa, the clatter of coffee cups was nearly drowned out by heated voices rising from a corner table. A young barista wiped down the counter as two customers leaned in, their argument crackling like static. "This is private family business," one said sharply, tapping his phone where AOC's speech replayed in a loop. The other shook her head, eyes flashing. "No, this is about a man who thought he could bury the truth with money and threat." Across the country, in an Alabama church hall, the congregation's midweek gathering had shifted into an impromptu debate. A deacon spoke cautiously, his voice tinged with unease. "We should pray for them all, for the child, for the nation." But a retired teacher sitting near the back shook her head slowly, gripping her cane. "It's not about the boy, it's about a man who thinks he's untouchable." Around her, murmurs rippled, some in agreement, others in quiet dissent. Meanwhile, in a Harvard lecture hall, a political ethics class erupted into chaos. Students clustered in groups, scrolling furiously through leaked court documents and fiery op-eds on their laptops. One raised his voice above the din. "This isn't just political corruption. It's a failure of every system meant to hold power accountable." Another shot back, "Or maybe it's a media circus designed to distract us from real issues." A professor at the front leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching the clash unfold. He didn't intervene. On the streets, protests swelled. Some carried placards demanding transparency. Others waved flags in defiance. Cars honked as they passed, some in support, others in frustration. Cable news played split screens. One side replaying AOC's rallying call for justice, the other showing White House press briefings attempting to downplay the scandal. In living rooms, diners, and laundromats, America's conversation shifted from whispers to open confrontations. The nation felt as if it was teetering on a knife's edge, everyone waiting for the next revelation to either steady or tip them over. Judge Rosanna Vitarelli stared at the screen of her phone, her thumb hovering above the message. "Unseal and your family suffers." No signature, no number, just words, chilling in their simplicity. She felt the air in her chambers thicken, heavy with memories she had spent years trying to suppress. She crossed the room to the tall mirror by the window. Her reflection stared back. Lines etched deep from decades on the bench, eyes dulled by too many compromises. She could still hear her clerk's voice from years ago, trembling as they filed the original Red Lantern documents under seal. For national security, Judge. She believed it then, or told herself she did. Now, staring at herself, she whispered, "I chose fear once, not again." Her fingers gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles whitened. Somewhere behind her, the vibration of her phone broke the silence. A second message. Last warning. She didn't turn. Instead, she drew a long breath, the weight in her chest loosening as resolve settled like stone in her gut. She spoke softly, not to the phone, not to the sender, but to her reflection. "They think threats will work. They forget who I am." She picked up her gavel from the desk. It felt heavier than usual as she cradled it in her hand. For a moment, her eyes flicked to a framed photo of her grandchildren smiling on a playground. Her jaw tightened. "Prepare the motion," she said aloud, voice steady now. "We're unsealing." Across town, an encrypted line buzzed to life in a White House sub-basement. "She's moving," a voice reported flatly. "Vitarelli's breaking." Then push phase 4, came the cold reply. Full pressure. But Vitarelli, unaware of the murmurs in the shadows, was already signing the order. The pen didn't shake, not this time. The tweet landed at 6:17 AIEM, simple and cutting through the noise like a blade. "You can't bury truth forever. It grows roots." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't add an image. No hashtags, no tags, just those words against a white background. Within minutes, it had over 3 million impressions, replies stacking faster than the app could load them. In newsrooms across the country, producers scrambled. At CNN headquarters, a breaking banner flashed across the screens. "Confirmed. Federal court set to unseal Red Lantern files within 24 hours. The anchor's voice carried a sense of barely contained urgency. Sources close to the federal judiciary confirm Judge Vitarelli has signed the order. Unless blocked, documents related to alleged hush money payments and paternity agreements will be public by this time tomorrow. In a suburban kitchen in Ohio, a man paused mid-tossed as his wife turned up the volume. In a cafe in Seattle, students hunched over laptops murmured, "It's actually happening." On Capitol Hill, aides ran through hallways, clutching folders stamped with "urgent" in red. At the White House, a phone slammed down hard enough to rattle the desk. "They think they've won," Trump growled to an inner circle of advisors, his face red with barely contained fury. "We'll see how they celebrate when it all burns." In a secure room nearby, Hope Sinclair whispered into her private line, her words clipped. "Operation Clean Sweep is no longer hypothetical. You know what that means." But across town, in a dim office where AOC's team gathered in tense silence, the Congresswoman simply exhaled as her phone buzzed with notifications. She locked eyes with Genevieve, sitting pale but determined across the table. 24 hours, AOC said softly. The clock's ticking for all of us. The gavel struck wood with a sharp finality. Judge Rosanna Vitarelli's hand didn't tremble as she signed the order, her pen gliding across the page in bold, deliberate strokes. Release all sealed materials under docket 19, CV 742. Effective immediately. The clerk nodded, eyes wide as she collected the document for processing. Across time zones, newsrooms erupted. CNN broke into regular programming with a flashing banner, breaking, Red Lantern files unsealed. BBC's anchors spoke with measured gravity, while Al Jazeera's live feed translated updates in real time. Screens lit up globally as headlines stacked one after another. The documents were staggering. A court order for a DNA test, signed in 2019 but marked unfulfilled in bold red. Financial ledgers showing a $3,100,000 0 cents transfer to an Arizona shell company traced back to Trump's legal team. And most damning of all, an internal email from Trump himself. Delay, deny, destroy. Crowds gathered outside federal courthouses, their murmurs swelling into chants. Some stared at their phones in stunned silence. Others recorded reaction videos that went viral within minutes. In her chambers, Vitarelli watched the feeds alone, her reflection faint in the glass behind the TV. She whispered under her breath, "It's done." But even as the truth spilled into daylight, in the West Wing's inner sanctum, a voice growled over a secure line, "Initiate Phase 4. This isn't over." The West Wing was a hive of chaos. Phones rang endlessly, aides barked into headsets, and papers littered the floors like fallen leaves. Hope Sinclair's office door stood ajar, her resignation letter sitting neatly on the mahogany desk, with her name scrawled across it in hurried pen strokes. She was already gone. Upstairs, Melania Trump wheeled a small suitcase down the marble hallway. Her heels clicked softly as she passed portraits of past presidents, her face calm but unreadable. She didn't glance back as Secret Service agents opened the private residence doors for her. In the Oval Office, Trump's rage was volcanic. He slammed his fist against the resolute desk, sending a glass of water crashing to the floor. "They betrayed me, every one of them," his voice cracked, raw from shouting. Outside, crowds surged across cities nationwide. In Chicago, Boston, Atlanta, thousands filled the streets waving handmade signs. Some demanded accountability, others chanted for justice. Helicopter cameras caught the scale of it, a movement swelling beyond partisanship. And from a corner window in the West Wing, Brian Halford watched silently as the chants echoed up Pennsylvania Avenue, their cadence rattling the glass. Under a gray sky, AOC stood atop a temporary stage in Freedom Plaza. Microphones jutted toward her like eager hands as cameras panned across a sea of faces, young, old, angry, hopeful. "This isn't about one man," she began, her voice carrying over the din of restless chants. "This is about who we choose to be as a nation. Do we protect lies, or do we protect truth?" A hush fell over the crowd. She continued, eyes scanning the rows of people clutching signs that read, "Truth over power," and "No one above the law." "We don't heal by pretending nothing happened. We heal by facing it together." Her words settled like weight on the plaza, not crushing but anchoring. Somewhere in the crowd, a man murmured, "She's not just speaking, she's fighting." And as applause swelled into a roar, AOC stepped back slightly, her hand still gripping the podium, steady as the camera zoomed in. The headlines came in waves. Trump under federal investigation. Red Lantern fallout sparks DOJ probe. America at a crossroads. News anchors spoke in measured tones as footage of subpoenas and court filings played on split screens. In a surprise appearance, Melania Trump sat before a single camera in a quiet studio, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed years of carrying secrets. "I stayed silent out of fear," she said, her accent thicker than usual, words deliberate. "But I speak now for my son. He deserves more than shadows and whispers." The clip spread like wildfire. In living rooms, coffee shops, and office break rooms, people paused mid-sentence, mid-sip, to watch her confession in full. The ripple of her words felt almost louder than the legal proceedings themselves. At the White House, lights burned late into the night as aides whispered about indictments and contingency plans. Outside the gates, protesters' chants bled into the cold air. "Truth won't wait." In a Harvard lecture hall, chalk scraped across the blackboard as Professor Brennan wrote in bold letters, "Can a leader lie and still lead with integrity?" The room fell into uneasy silence before exploding into heated discussion. A student in the back stood, voice shaking with conviction. "A lie isn't just about the act, it's about the betrayal of trust." Another countered, "But politics has always been about compromise. Is this any different?" For 3 hours, voices clashed, hands waved, arguments circled. The question lingered in the air like smoke, impossible to settle. Outside, snow began to fall softly against the tall windows, muffling the city's noise as the debate raged on. The corridors of Capitol Hill were quiet as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked alone, her footsteps soft against the marble floor. There was no cheering crowd, no cameras waiting at the door. Her staff had offered to greet her, to mark the moment with applause, but she had refused. This wasn't a victory march, it was a return to work. In her office, the blinds were half drawn, the faint glow of morning cutting sharp lines across her desk. She placed her coat on the chair and set down the folder that had once felt heavier than stone. Standing by the window, she watched the city stir awake below. "Truth doesn't destroy," she murmured to no one in particular. "It heals, but only if we let it." Her reflection in the glass was calm but resolute, the weight of recent weeks etched into her eyes. She straightened, taking a slow breath as the sound of distant voices echoed through the halls. When she turned and stepped into the main chamber, sunlight streamed through the tall glass panels overhead. It caught in her hair, her silhouette framed in gold as she moved forward, a solitary figure carrying more than her own legacy. A quiet symbol that even in chaos, hope could find a way to shine. This isn't just a story of politics or scandal. It's a warning. When the truth finally broke through the walls of power, it didn't just expose lies. It set the world on edge. AOC's defiance, Genevieve's dangerous choice to speak, even Melania's whispered rebellion. Each was a spark in a powder keg of secrets too long buried. And now, the question isn't if the system will retaliate, it's when. If the truth could destroy everything you've built, would you still speak it? Or would you let the silence swallow you alive? Courage isn't about not fearing the dark. It's about lighting a match, knowing it might burn you too. If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to Alexandria Rising Stories, where every voice matters and every story echoes far beyond the screen. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative, created for educational, inspirational, and storytelling purposes. While it may be inspired by real public events, people, or societal issues, it includes imagined dialogue, reconstructed scenes, and character interpretations meant to highlight broader themes of justice, dignity, and resilience. Any resemblance to actual events or individuals beyond public knowledge is purely coincidental. We do not intend to defame, mislead, or harm, but to invite reflection and meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching Alexandria Rising Stories.